So what we're talking about today is basically looking at how everyone is unique. Not all of us are the same. So if we take these two lovely women as an example, so here we've got Valerie Adams. And as you can see, if you probably met her on the street, Valerie is a much stronger body type. If you met her on the street, you might think she's a little bit big or a little bit overweight. In actual fact, she is perfectly in perfect shape for her particular body type. You can see she's built a lot of muscle, and that is what her body type is designed for. And then on this side we have Eliza McCartney, who is a very slim, long, lean muscles, a completely different body type, both at the peak of their game, yet what they're doing movement-wise, what they're eating and how they're living is very different to each other. So just like in this example, everybody here will have a unique way of living and being and eating and moving that works best for your body type. So, you know, at the moment there's a lot of information out there. You know, we've got paleo being pushed by, you know, big part of the health market. So you've got, you know, Paleo Pete, and Paleo Pete thinks paleo is fantastic. And why is that? It's because paleo works really well for his body type. And, you know, he comes from a place of wanting to help others, so he, you know, is a big fan of paleo. Then you've got different other types, you know, vegetarian, low carb, high fat, low carb, vegan. You've got different forms of movement, yoga, boot camps, all different options that right now there's a lot of confusion out there. People are not really sure exactly what is best or optimum for their particular body. And that's what we will have a look at today.
So I'll introduce you to the science of epigenetics. Have you heard that word before? I guess no? Okay. So back until the 1980s, when I went through medical school, everything was in your genes. So if you had dodgy genes, you would end up with dodgy health, right? And there was a big push to find out exactly what the human genome was, to find out what our gene sequences were. Now, this appeared in 1998, and much to the disappointment of the scientists back in the area, they realized that we only have about 20,000 genes in a worm. There's only a couple of thousand genes less in us. So they couldn't explain that. And what happens really is that we've got our genes, but the genes get modified by the environment, and so what you see is the result of those genes exposed to the environment, and so what you see in the body is what is called your phenotype. So your phenotype, that part of you that actually gets manifested is the phenotype. So you can have, for example, a gene that says if you're prone to diabetes. However, if you're running a lifestyle that goes against diabetes, you might very likely never manifest that diabetes, even though it's in your genes. Okay, so I'll give you an example of this would be, click that.
Oh.
Okay, so these two rats are genetically identical. They've got exactly the same genes. Both rats, they're little siblings, were fed BPA, you know that famous BPA that's being removed from plastic? The reason why removing it is because it's very similar to estrogen, to feminine hormones. So they were both fed BPA, but this rat on top of that got things like folic acid, choline, vitamin B12 and so on. So very typical nutrients, nothing wondrous out of that. This rat developed normally and healthy. This one is obese and diabetic. So notice how, even though they have the same genetic background, a modification in their nutrition has a change in their actual phenotype manifesting in the real world. An example of how this works, so when I discovered pH 360, I was like, okay, this is my body type, blah, blah, that sounds right. And then I decided to do my genetic analysis for myself to see how well it linked to what pH 360 was saying about me. And there were some interesting findings which corroborate that the database does work very well. But additionally to that, when I did the test and then I consulted the person who specializes in analyzing the lab test, she said you have to go and have a vitamin D test done because your genes are rubbish for vitamin D. Your vitamin D must be really, really low. So when I did the lab test and it came back completely normal. So I am doing something right with my lifestyle, for example, never using sunblock. But there's something really working for me in the sense that I should have very low levels of vitamin D and I don't, even though my genes say that I should have that, okay? So a lot of people right now are doing the genetic testing, and that's great. It gives you some extra information, but it doesn't mean that whatever your genes show, that's what you're going to manifest. There's a whole lot of things that you can do to modify that expression on the genes. And so when we talk about environment, it's funny because when we had to give a name to this talk, we named it Eat and Live Right for Your Body Type, because everyone is obsessed about the food. And everybody seems to think that that's all it is, but actually it turns out that it has got to do not only, food is only a particle of your life. It's got to do with how you engage in social relationships, whether you're indoors or outdoors, what kind of work you do, whether you are working on something that you find purposeful and meaningful, what type of exercise you're engaging in, what time of the day you're engaging in exercise, how do you sleep, and what activities you occupy your mind with. So it's very vast. Okay. So the background to this talk comes again from PH360. We'll tell you more as we go, but it stands for Personalized Health 360. Now, the background to that database is all the published science linking different measurements, things that you can measure and see, to health conditions. So, for example, there are publications linking the size of your neck to disease outcomes. Okay? There is data also measuring the length of the femur and how that can affect your health as well. This is just a little glimpse of the database. Actually has got 10,000 entry points of all the medical studies that have been published linking anything in your phenotype with health outcomes. So as Amy was saying, what happened was, I go every year to a conference for integrative medical doctors, and this year they invited to a retreat, and I was like, what would a bunch of doctors do in a retreat? What's that about, right? So I was very curious, and it was called Personalized Health. When you read that in a medical conference, you're like, yeah, whatever, they're gonna talk about immunology or something, but it turns out that it wasn't Wahiki, and it was run by the group, the PH360 group, and what they did straight away was get us in the retreat, measure us up, and give us our profile as to who we were in the 6 body types, right? And according to that profile, they fed us, and they exercised us accordingly. So for example, I was an activator, and I had the fortune of waking up at 5:30 in the morning to go and do some CrossFit. And they also provided different foods according to the body types, and it became very interesting. You'll see later, well, how can you feed 2 people who are completely opposite body types in the same family? But it works well because what you do is just modify a little bit something that you already had. And for the whole of 2 days, there was this whole group of people being fed and exercised according to the body types, and then talking about how we're going to solve all the problems in the world, which was really interesting. And in the back of the room was Matt, and Matt is the guy who's behind PH360. And the story goes like this: Matt he's got a master's in health science, and he was training top athletes in Australia, according to this idea that not everybody has to do the same thing, they cannot exercise in the same way, and he was being very successful. He also has a very entrepreneurial mind, and he created a range of gyms that were doing very well in Australia. 12 years ago, he wakes up one morning with excruciating pain in his leg, and goes to a doctor. They don't know what it is. Go to the neurologist. They don't know what it is. Finally, they take a biopsy out of his muscles, and it shows that he had deposits of protein on his nerves. This is a condition called amyloid polyneuropathy. It's a very rare genetic condition, but basically his prognosis was he would be dead within 3 to 5 years, because the protein accumulation would occur in every nerve in the body, and that was it. So being who he was, and with the money and the context, he decided to travel the world to see who could give him a better option. Now, the conclusion of that trip was 2 things. You can't eat any protein at all, which is unheard of in the world of nutrition, as you can imagine, because your genes don't allow you to metabolize the protein, and that's why they're accumulating on your nerves. And the second one was, you need to move to a warmer climate. That's the one that suits your body type. And he was living in Adelaide, and he moved to northern Queensland. And he took up surfing as well, which is part of his profile. Nice. Anyway, so 12 years later, after that experience, he also had a bit of an epiphany, thinking, I was able to do this because I've got the money and I've got the knowledge. But all of these people out there don't have this. What if we put together a database where people can go and lodge on the program their measurements, assesses their body type, and gives them the recommendations of how to maximize the potential of their bodies? And so he got together with top scientists in the world, and they created the Ultimate Human Foundation, and it's a worldwide movement now. Matt has been in TED Talks, I think Oprah. I mean, he's in. You Google him, he's like talk. And the objective of this foundation is to finish chronic pain and disease by 2050. And this PH360 is part of it.
Awesome. So yeah, so PH360. So now you can see this is one of the sort of main outputs of the concept. So as you can see, 360 comes from the 360 degrees of a circle, and the way the system works, as Morella mentioned, is it's taken, it looks at body types by looking at different measures on your parts of your body. So there'll be parts of your body that don't change depending on your environment and lifestyle. For example, your head circumference, your jaw, neck, wrist and elbows. So areas like that actually give us a lot of information about your genetics and your phenotype. And so all that information is entered into the system along with your responses to 70 different questionnaires that look at your skin colour, your eye colour, your hair colour, what illnesses you have had in your life, what illnesses your parents have had or grandparents. It's a very extensive questionnaire to try and capture all this information. So that goes back in, runs a whole lot of correlations with the information in the database that they hold, and then comes back with, for an individual, what their dominant body type is. So what we're looking at here is these words in the middle here are the 6 different body types that the system identifies with in the main. So we've got sensor down the bottom, Crusader, activator, connector, guardian and diplomat. And so whilst at the moment we're looking at this as like a 2D image, in actual fact, if you can kind of picture it, it would be like a 3D image where you might have a lot of characteristics of a diplomat, but in actual fact you think a bit more like a connector and you act a bit like an activator. So you can have lots of different attributes from different body types, but the system sort of generally brings back what your body type is in the main, what you've correlated with most closely. So every single one of these different body types has different types of food, different types of movement, different personalities, and once we sort of go through it, you might suddenly go, oh yeah, that's me, oh yeah, that's Bob, that's Jill, and you suddenly start to get a bit of an understanding of other people around you, which is one of the reasons I love the tool. I've worked with a husband and wife, and we've discussed different body types that they have. I've found it hugely insightful for my own marriage. Things that didn't used to make sense now make a bit more sense to me in terms of the different ways that I think to my husband. So it's a very powerful tool. And so what we'll do now is we'll go through each of the different body types so you can get a bit of an understanding.
Right, so let's start with the sensors. Sensors are those long people with very fine muscles. They seem to never gain weight. Do you know anyone like this? So all those models.
Emily.
Yeah.
She was the model at one of our information talks. So here's our model, Emily.
So the models in the fashion industry are sensors, all of them pretty much, except now there's a bit of a trend to more curves, but yeah. So long, lean bones, very little fat, not really equipped to be robust. If there was a serious famine, an earthquake, a drought, or anything, the first ones to go are the sensors.
Yeah, don't hook on to a sensor if you're in a family. Go for somebody else.
I'd run that risk. I'd be tall and skinny any day.
And the fact that's how they are when they're in their normal weight. Okay, that doesn't mean that being a sensor you can't gain a bit of weight. However, you'll see that they never really accumulate the weight anywhere, right? It's just they can get a little bit of weight, but they don't have a tendency to accumulate it. The sensor mind. So embryologically, the embryo has got 3 layers. And these guys derive from the ectoderm, which is a part of the embryo that then generates the skin in your nervous system and your senses. So you can imagine that not only are they thin and skinny, not a lot of fat, but they live in their heads all the time because they have to figure out the world from a mental point of view to come up with solutions to fight the tiger, to escape the flood. It's all in their heads all the time. So they have got a very sensitive mind to the point of sometimes getting overwhelmed. They're very aware of harmony. They walk into a space and they're looking for harmony. I guess that comes from looking for a sense of security. I recently had a client come into my consult room and she stepped in. Look around. and then sat down. It's like she was assessing whether that was okay for her to be there. Definitely a sense of tall and skinny. They love a lot of artists are sensors. They're driven by information. For example, there's nothing better than giving a sensor a project where they have to develop a process and a system, because they will do it beautifully. You can imagine being tall and skinny, not a lot of fat. The best environment for this kind of people is being in a dry, hot and humid, let's say dry, hot and humid, in a hot and humid climate, so Bora Bora for all of them, obviously, where they can get a bit of a long time, say on a hammock somewhere. But if that's not available, like in the case of New Zealand, a sensor's best recommendation would be at the end of the day to go and have a hot bath, for example, where they can shut the door and stay away from everybody, just to offload the senses. Food-wise, so if the nervous system was well developed, there wasn't a lot of energy to develop the digestive system. It's quite a weak digestive system, actually. Not able to eat in large amounts, so they're more like snackers throughout the day. It's better that they eat 5-6 times a day, and it's better if they eat well-cooked foods. So actually, if you put a sensor on a raw food diet, they don't do very well. Okay, because their system is not able to digest the foods. Because they're in activity in their mind all the time, they do quite well. This is a body type that does quite well with higher amounts of carbs and fats. They need that for their brain function. They're highly sensitive to toxins. So highly sensitive not only to, well, typical ones, the alcohol and the caffeine and all that, but things like colorants in the food and chemical additives and so on. They tend to have intolerances.
Excuse me. Have you found with hair colour and eye colour as well with that one?
There is a...
Being a boat builder, we found the blue-eyed and green-eyed and fair-haired people and the redheads, they just get wiped out real quick with chemicals.
Yes, and that goes into the database. When you enter your data and PH 60, they ask you about your hair color, your eye color, freckles. Yeah. Socially, so a sensor is, they enjoy their social interactions, but again, they're not gregarious and being in a group and going to a concert and, you know, sort of, they're more in their own world, and they can be quite okay on their own as well. Some of them can be quite eccentric. They're really happy to be themselves, and they don't have to compromise to be with anyone, really. Independent. So what can go wrong with the sensor? Well, number one is digestion, definitely. You know, as soon as they get anxious, which is a predisposition they have, it goes straight into their gut, and that's when they start having digestive problems. Okay, so they can have anything from IBS, they can have SIBO, they can have, well, anything with the digestive system. From an exercise point of view, again, it's not a body that is made for lifting weights or anything like that. If anything, they're quite gracious. And but they can become quite rigid as well. So things like yoga, like Tai Chi, where they can use their body, use their mind at the same time in a way that is fluid. So you see a lot of ballet dancers, for example, are sensors. Yoga instructors, a lot of them are sensors. And if they're going to do cardio, just do it for short duration. It's not for them to do the big marathons or anything like that. If they're going to do weights, it's light and with multiple repetitions. Another aggravation would be the restless mind, so a predisposition to anxiety, for example, which comes from them being hyper alert.
Okay, so we've just looked at sensor, and now we're moving around to Crusader. So Crusader is very similar to a sensor in that they're much more what we call the ectomorph body, so longer, leaner muscles. But what we're moving around to now, they still live a lot in their brain and are quite determined characters. So your Crusader, again, are not going to end up putting a lot of weight on. Their normal sort of body tone will be that long, lean structure. So what we're looking at here, generally you'll see, you know, middle distance runners, endurance sports, they can really excel in these areas. So your likes of John Walker, Nick Willis, they would all be Crusaders. They're great at long distance sport and that sort of repetitive movement as well. So Crusaders generally are very determined people, and their dominant hormone is dopamine. So these are the people that, you know, that actually need a target and need a goal in their life. And if they don't have a target and goal in their life, that's when they can actually become ill and feel very unwell within themselves. As we've got here, you know, they're very much leaders and visionaries, still like the sensor, have a very high brain function. They like to solve problems. They can often be highly skeptical. So, you know, Crusaders will want to know the scientific research behind something, want to know exactly why, often can be very direct in their communication as well. But generally, once they've got on board with something and understand why, then they are the people that will most likely to stick to something, or will, you know, very much have their blinkers on and go after what it is that their purpose is. So yeah, love a target, and not having one, as I mentioned before, can actually be very distressing for them. So socially, very straightforward and to the point. You know, you're not going to see Crusaders generally are not your sort of idle chatter type of people. They like to socialise with people on the same sort of mission or purpose to them. So when we got trained in PH360, both the guys who trained us were Crusaders, and one of them was telling us how they had gone on a retreat to Spain. You know, where there's all this wonderful food and weather and wine and, you know, amazing place. And the highlight of his trip to Spain was when they were all sitting inside a room, him and 2 or 3 other people tapping away at their computer working on their project. So that, for his Crusader mind, was the highlight of being in Spain. So that sort of that social interaction for them is very much aligned,
The mission.
aligned to their mission, you know. Yeah, very interesting. So again, they need to be outside in the fresh air, and a bit of moisture is really good for them as well. So being inside for too long can actually cause some headaches. And this is a type of body which, we get to it soon, but they will forget to eat and they will forget to rest. You know, a good friend of mine, her son is a Crusader and is just wants to be a professional soccer player, completely focused on soccer. He will go for hours and hours and hours playing soccer and completely forget to eat. And then you can imagine at the end of the day, he's sort of like a shell of his former self because he just hasn't taken the time out, you know, until he understands how important eating is for his purpose. You know, he won't think eating and stopping is actually very important. So again, because of that dominance of the central nervous system, the digestion system in the Crusader is also reasonably weak, so they also need food that is well cooked and rich in minerals as well. What tends to go wrong? So yeah, as I said before, literally they tend to just burn themselves out because they're just so focused on what it is that they're doing. That spelled quick.
That was quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. That was very Crusaders. Straight to the point.
If you look back at the picture that was Steve Jobs was a Crusader, definitely. So you recognize them because even though they tend to be skinny, they're more fibrous in their legs. If you look at the legs of those long distance cyclists, they're long and fibrous, so not chunky. As we go into the wheel, now we're going into the mesomorphs. So the mesomorphs have got a lot more muscle, right? So more muscles.
Chunky.
Yeah, becomes chunkier. So the next group here is the activator, and you recognize, and also, another characteristic would be the mesomorphs start going shorter in stature. So shorter in stature, more muscle. So the activator is the next one in the group, and I am an activator. Okay, and I'm actually smack in the middle activator, so I don't look like that at the moment. I'm looking. But an activator body is made to move. So it's got a lot of muscle, it's got exactly the light length where they're not bumping into stuff, you know, would be the martial artists of the groups. Medium bones, shorter, muscle definition, and the important hormones. So every body type has got an important hormone or an important set of hormones. These ones all relate to the adrenals. So it's like, come on, go, do, act, that's an activator style of person. The mind goes with it, okay? So an activator will always be looking for the next challenge, the next risk, the greatest extreme sport. I parachuted for fun for a whole year and a half in my 20s. That was my sport. Risk takers, not only in sport, but also in business, in romance. I knew money for 5 days before coming to New Zealand. This lack of routine, and the motto for an activator would be, well, we act first and think later, which sometimes can be useful, sometimes it's a catastrophe. An activator loves competition, so if you get activators in a group, typically if you want to really motivate them, you get a couple of groups and make them compete against each other. They love a challenge. Says here, easily distracted by new things. I've got my 2 business partners that are completely different body type, and they're like, oh my god, what have you got yourself into now? What's the new thing now? So I go in cycles every 3 years, I come up with the latest thing that we're going to do. Socially, again, the activity is all about the next challenge, the next thrill, the next whatever. If they find people who are willing to do that with them, they'll take them along, and they'll have a good time doing it. If there's no one, it doesn't matter. We're going to do it anyway. Very adaptable to new circumstances and environments, thrill seekers. What can go wrong? Okay, so it's this body is like a cat, and it can get angry quite easily. Okay, so that if you look at populations like the Spaniards, for example, high predominance of activators. So that that Latino kind of that comes with the body type. Okay. And so need to eat regularly. It's funny because the PH360 comes with an app, and the app every 3 or 4 hours will tell me, "Hey Morella, it's time for a snack." Because
when we did the information evening last week, we were talking about the fact that activators need to eat all the time. You can hear this woman in the audience go, "Yes!" Which was the best news she's heard.
Yeah, and there is a lot of that energy. So we consume a lot of antioxidants. So it's good for an activator to supplement with antioxidants, for example, fish oils or... in saying that, we're not very good at assimilating stuff from vegetables. Okay, so we need to eat vegetables, but not a predominantly vegetable diet. So there is a big component of animal protein in our diet. As you can see, I'm not in the right place of the world, right? So medium hot and dry climate, and that can really seriously affect me. I have a tendency to be cold all the time. I remember being in New Zealand, something like 2 years into being here, we had central heating for the first time, and it was like my world was changed suddenly. Very affected by the wind as well. First month in New Zealand was in Wellington. I told me, not staying here.
It's amazing to stay.
What tends to go wrong, it's a body that needs movement all the time, and so if an activator ends up, say, in a clerical job, just working 9 to 5 behind the desk, they can start developing symptoms of pain. I actually have a number of people with fibromyalgia at the moment, and when I look at the body type, they're activators and they're in a job where they're not moving. Even I have so my consult in Mountain, and I sit behind a desk, and that's how I work, and at the end of Tuesday, which is my long day, I'm like, oh my god, okay, so a lot of movement is required, and there's a tendency towards inflammation, so sore joints, arthritis, things like more like the burning digestive disorders, peptic ulcers, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, and so on.
Awesome, so now we're moving around to connectors. So if you can picture the 360-degree wheel, so connectors can sit either towards activator, so I'm a connector, but I sit very closely towards activator, so you'll see in my body type I'm probably not too dissimilar to Morella. If you're a connector sitting more towards guardian, which guardian we'll get to soon, you'll see a body that's a lot more curvaceous than what my body is. So again, so it does depend on where you sit on that wheel as to how you might behave and how you might look as well. So connectors, generally, again, we're still a little bit, I don't like to think I'm that short. Generally shorter in stature, again, still a medium bone density, medium muscle structure, love team sports. So just like the word connector says, love to be around people, love to be involved in a team. They will often, connectors will sort of always think about what's the best for a group, but actually within the group, connectors like to feel a little bit special as well. So we love validation, which Morella knows, so she'll often send me little texts just to make my connector a little sparkle. So yes, you'll see the curves in women, particularly as you start to go towards the guardian end. So the important hormone for a connector is oxytocin. So oxytocin is released with a nice cuddle. So often connectors that love to have a good cuddle with people. Our mind, connector's mind definitely still thrives on diversity. So it's really important to have a few different interesting projects on the go to keep the mind active and to feel well within ourselves. And we need to be with people as well. So generally, if a connector is working by themselves, they will really start to feel that within their body, and it'll very quickly impact on their mood if they have a sense of isolation or loneliness. So it's one of the most important body types to be socially connected and working alongside other people. We had a client on one of our last programs who is a connector, and so she's an older lady. She had 6 children, however many grandchildren she has, and unfortunately had quite a few friends who had different illnesses. So a lot of her connections were actually based around family dramas or illnesses, and it had a significant impact on her body. And even though she felt like she was doing everything she could do in terms of food and movement, so her main challenge in terms of her health was actually to start connecting with people where the energy is a bit lighter and a bit fun, because connectors can tend to take on the energy of people around them, which very soon sucks their own energy. Social, you love to do things in a group, love to play and love to have fun. So often if you've worked in a business or something and you've got that person that just seems to be chatting to people all day long, that's probably the connector within the organisation. And actually, if given a job where their role is to network and is to connect, they're actually very, very good at it. Food, so now we're starting to get around the side of the circle where food does become more about pleasure. So before we saw food, with Crusaders, it's just about fuel. They don't take as much pleasure from food, whereas we're starting to get round to the part of the circle where food is about pleasure. Food is about enjoying it with other people, and that's actually really important. And lots of variety in food as well for a connector. So there is a tendency to inflammation, just like activators. So a diet high in antioxidants is really important, and sensitive to excess sugars as well. In terms of the environment, now we are cooling off a little bit as we move around the circle. So actually this sort of 21 to 27 degrees still cracks me up. That says mild climate, because 27 degrees is positively hot for New Zealand. So but generally a mild climate, warm during the day and cooler at night, and dryish. And also for a connector, I know for me, actually seeing the sun is very important. And if the sun doesn't come out, it can have a significant impact on mood as well. So it's just having that awareness of different body types. And so, I now have an awareness about if I don't see the sun, what are my other strategies to help boost my mood. Exercise, in terms of setting a connector up for success, it's all about exercising with other people. So if we can exercise in a team or meet somebody, then it's much more likely to happen. Have a personal trainer that makes things fun and makes things interesting. Now I went to my husband, who's a diplomat, and we'll get to him. He has had the same personal trainer for 13 or 15 years. And I went to him, last year. I've gone to personal trainers a few times. I last about, I don't know, maybe a month. And so I went to my husband's personal trainer, and my husband's personal trainer is a Crusader. And, gave me this program, and the second time I was meant to go to him, my car battery got flat and I never made it, and then I quit. And the reason is because the program was just so boring. I very quickly lose interest if you're giving me an exercise program that's just boring. Crusader, somebody like Marty, who's the personal trainer, would have been, stuck to everything. I just found it boring. I was meant to be doing it home by myself. It was completely the wrong form of movement for me, and I know that now. And so in moving, I set myself up for success moving in different ways. So what tends to go wrong? Connectors are very much chameleons who feel what other people are feeling, and end up, like I said before, can take on a lot of energy from other people, can take on a lot of other people's problems and hold that within themselves as well. So it's very much around learning to let go and sort of protect our own energy. So as it says here, don't find pleasure in doing things alone. So generally, if there's an eating plan to follow or exercise, it's much better to get a buddy on board and do it alongside somebody else. And generally, committing in general is very difficult. So a connector will kind of go, oh, this is awesome, I'm going to try this, and then it hasn't worked, I'm going to try something different, and I'm going to try something different. So actually committing to something long term and working through a process is one of connectors' life challenges.
Right, so you can imagine now with the height, we had the sensors, the Crusaders, the activators, the connectors, and then we're getting to guardians now. Now guardians are shorter, a lot stronger, big bones, chunky muscles. These guys were designed to sustain the famine, the earthquake, the droughts, the ice age, the recovery from the ice age. In the olden systems of medicine, these guys had the best bodies. The problem is that now we don't see it that way. We've got a problem with hyperabundance of sugars, for example, which is their biggest downfall. So very curvaceous, and with men, when they exercise properly, they can develop quite a bit of muscle mass as well. However, they have a layer of fat as well. They've got the genes that allow them to accumulate food for the future, so they're prepared for the drought and the famine and so on. As the name says it, even mentally and socially, they see their mission in life is looking after other people. So you often find that they're head of the family who cooks for everybody. They organize the parties for the whole family. They look after everybody. They're the grandmas who look after 15 grandchildren at the same time. Their important hormone is prolactin. Prolactin is the hormone that allows us to breastfeed. And even men have prolactin. So guardian men have got prolactin as well as a ruler. Job-wise, and they tend to be in professions of service. They just love serving other people. So you find them in the nursing profession, psychologists. I went to a dance retreat the other way. There's something about guardians which I find incredible is the fluidity they have. So I went to this dance retreat, and these two lovely girls were dancing, and it was like they were disjointed. But and then I went to talk to them, and one of them was a nanny, and the other one was a massage therapist. And they were obvious guardians, both of them. They tend to like stability, so they're the typical employees who would be in the company for 18 years and love it, and be the core of the business. Food-wise, food is all about pleasure. So imagine the Italian nonna making pasta for everybody, and making sure that it's full of love for everybody. However, their gut is very well developed. It can absorb the last little nutrient out of anything. Okay, so this is the body type that does the best on a vegetarian diet. Okay, and if they're going to have animal protein in very small amounts. This is the body type that does very well with fasting. And they do very well with having less meals in the day, 2, maximum 3, and even the dinner has to be something very light, like a soup. They tolerate fasting very well, they benefit from fasting, and they're very sensitive to anything sugary. So these are the ones who have got problems with sugar in any form. Okay. Actually, it was interesting, the last program that we did, we got a group of people who were referred by the doctors because they had metabolic syndrome. So that means diabetes, pre-diabetes, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, obesity in the center of the body. And when we put them on the platform, they were all within 80 degrees of each other. So they were all guardians, or the connectors right next to guardians, or the diplomats right next to guardians. So it was this group that was mostly affected by this condition. They love it in Riverhead, okay? So they tend to overheat, and so they would like a cold and humid climate. So New Zealand is perfect for the guardians. Exercise-wise, and again, they've got enormous potential to be very strong, and their body likes feeling strong. Okay, so they will benefit largely from lifting weights or doing activities where they're lifting loads. Gardening, if they're males, if their job is things like construction, then that's the best thing for their bodies. They're not particularly interested in thrill. You know, they lack stability and staying at home. Typically, they're homemakers, so they do need a lot of exercise. But they need to do it with people that they consider family. So that's how you get them out of the door and going and exercising. If they're going to do cardio, it's not going to be marathons or ultra marathons. It will be slow cardio, such as walking through the woods or maybe going for a swim. But they do need to improve their breathing and their circulation.
And so often in the actual PH360 platform as well, for guardians in this sort of body type, it will actually say for them to avoid exercise that causes sweating, because the body is already naturally quite warm, that it can actually be detrimental to their health if they push their body to the extent that they start sweating.
Interesting, eh? What tends to go wrong, when the first thing that I see all the time is that they think that there's something wrong with them, you know? And in our current world, what is trendy is being Crusader or an activator. Connections. But yeah, Crusaders activators, so they are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum, and the whole of society sees this body as if something is wrong, or they're lazy, or they're not putting enough effort. But a healthy guardian is actually quite round. You know, there is something about that body that will always be round. And again, they've got a problem with their pancreas, with insulin, so anything around the metabolic syndrome kind of illnesses, high cholesterol, diabetes, prediabetes, and problems with sugar. And the last group is?
Okay, so the lucky last one is our diplomats. So again, still a body type that is designed for strength. So think of Vikings, and literally diplomats generally, although not always. I had a diplomat yesterday who is actually the exact same height as me. So it can vary a little bit, but generally they can be quite tall.
And they sit between the guardians who are shortish, and the next group is censors. So within diplomats, you can see people who are towards the shorter end, or you can see the really humongous Amazonian sort of specimens.
Structures. So again, in terms of weight, they'll generally tend to put on weight throughout different parts of the body, and the normal sort of structure is demonstrated here. That's terrible. Anyway, I hate that slide. Okay, so you'll see lots of variety in the body shapes. So as Morella just said, towards the guardian, they might be a little bit shorter and rounder. Towards censor, you're going to start going into that quite long, lean body. And do have a really strong tendency to build muscle if they are lifting weights and working out in the gym. Very strong bodies, and a lot of variety in the body shape. So in terms of the mind, a really important thing for diplomat is to be able to do things on their own time. So no rush. Take it nice and easy and be able to move at their own pace. So we homeschool our oldest child, and so I've started it's only a recent change, and I have started working or getting to know people within the homeschool community, and quite a few of the mothers homeschool because they don't think they could get their kids to school in time. It's hilarious, and you actually see that they are diplomats. And so the whole concept of having to get up and rush and get school lunches back is actually a really big challenge. It's not the whole reason why they do it, but that's often what they joke about us because I couldn't get them to school in time. But yes, definitely enjoy moving at their own rhythm and pace. So you'll find a diplomat, if there's any sort of other people putting a lot of time pressures on them, they'll very easily start to get stressed. Socially, family and close friends are a big priority for diplomats. So they're generally easygoing, and they're not going to be the type of people who lead the pack. So at a party, they're not going to be the people suggesting we all jump on the tables and boogie on the tables. They're going to be the people kind of kicking back and relaxing and sort of just enjoying people's company. They're not going to be like Morella, they'll just be kicking back. Environment, definitely a cool climate with a bit of humidity, and like to have fresh air flowing through as well. So my husband, who's a diplomat, we always have the bedroom windows open all the time, and if they're closed, he will actually get congestion in his sinuses if he doesn't have that fresh air flowing throughout the bedroom. Diet. So again, like a guardian, they actually do really well on a high vegetable diet to get all their nutrients, and the pancreas does have a difficulty dealing with sugar. So one of the head coaches who we work with is a diplomat, and she actually notices a big difference depending on what she eats for dinner the night before in terms of her energy the next day. So she will generally now has got to the point where she will eat a high vegetable dinner, most of the time a soup, and once she does that, she feels really great the next day. If she eats what she used to eat, she notices a big difference in her energy level. Exercise. So again, slower, steadier, and it's all about strength. So these are not going to be CrossFitters who are jumping up at 6 a.m. and doing your high intensity workouts. That can actually cause inflammation in their body. And again, it's actually a diplomat, because it's important to be able to do things on your own time. The morning needs to be a very slow pace. So if they're going to do any form of exercise that's intense, then it needs to be in the afternoon. So, having a nice gentle walk in nature, walking the dog in the morning is completely fine. In fact, it would probably be very good for them. But if they're going to do any form of high intensity exercise, it's best left for the afternoon. And a big long warm up is very important. So what tends to go wrong? So the most important or dominant neurotransmitter is serotonin for a diplomat. And so when they are well and within balance, then the serotonin levels will be well. What can happen though when they're out of balance is it can cause analysis paralysis. So diplomats have a really strong ability to be able to take in lots of information, think through things, and then make a decision. So as opposed to like our activator, who has acted first and gone and done something already, the diplomat will think through things and make a decision. if they're not well within themselves, it can be very difficult to get to the decision point. So it's just thinking about something and thinking about something and thinking about it, thinking about it. So it's very much a different way, though, of making decisions. So that can be a real challenge for them. It's got similar, diplomats have similar sugar problems as guardians. So sugar is something that needs to be minimized most of the time in their way of eating. A sluggish lymphatic system, and yeah, generally should be waking up late and taking it easy in the morning.
We have so I work with someone who's a diplomat, and her child who's 10 is an activator. And that's very interesting because she is and she goes into analysis paralysis quite often because she wants to get it right, and so she analyzes every single aspect of the decision, takes ages and so on. In the meanwhile, the little girl, for an activator, rules are there to be broken, so she gets pretty much on a daily basis a call from school about what happened, and she just cringes. Now the beauty is that you can start seeing the patterns in the children and understand that that's how it is. It's not because they're bad or it's in their nature. So if you look at this wheel here, so we've finished now the body types. Just to summarize, we would have the longer, leaner, thinner, no fat, and so it's starting to decrease in size and the muscles become a little bit more defined. Over here we're getting chunkier muscles, a lot more athletic ability. Actually, one of the base bodies to have for an athlete is a connector, because not only do they have the agility of an activator, but also a bit of body fat for endurance. Then you get into the guardians, who are extremely resilient, so some of the base health if they watch the sugar problem. And they start, so these are quite short as well. And then we start increasing in height here, and very strong Amazonian kind of bodies. With regards to biorhythms, and that's something that doctors never tell you either, because we don't know anything about it. Guess what? We never had that class. It turns out that these bodies here are more like the early birds. So we benefit in here waking up early in the morning and doing most of our activities, both mental and physical, in the morning, and then going to bed maximum at 10. Now, if you start going to the other side, actually, guardians are night owls, and diplomats need a very slow start to the morning. They need to warm up into the day, and they're night owls and do their best work at night. Okay? Yeah, so that's pretty much what it is. Any questions? Do you identify yourselves already with a group?
Yeah. So this business of opposites attract is really a load of rubbish. We're better not doing that.
It can be good in the sense that you are with someone who's going to be complementary and doing what you don't want to do, but it can cause clashes because, like do you want to tell your story? Amy had been struggling with decision-making processes.
Yeah, so my husband, as I mentioned, so I'm here, my husband is here, we're on the complete opposite side of the wheel, and I generally, with decisions, tend to act probably a bit like an activator, where I just think and do something, and he is the opposite, and I always used to go, well, what's your gut instinct? Because that's how an activator works, very much on instinct, very reactive, very quick, and we had this argument for years. Like, I don't have an instinct. Everyone's got an instinct. I don't have an instinct. And now it's kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. No, actually, you don't have an instinct. You actually think in a very different way and process things in a very different way. And so, in that regard, we're very complementary in the fact that, anything to, put up or something, I'll just try and do it and make mistake after mistake, and he'll take out the instructions and read through. He's very good with all the attention to detail and paperwork, and I'm rubbish at it.
But you finished before you started reading.
But I probably made 10 mistakes throughout the whole thing. In fact, we had to fill out paperwork the other week, and I'd kind of done it thinking, oh, it's so boring, I'd go back to it later. And meanwhile, he had meticulously worked through his, and he hadn't realised that I hadn't finished it, handed it in. He gets it back, you haven't done it right. So I didn't. I just, a bit blasé about things. Whereas he's very much, will go through things very logically. So that in that way we complement each other, but then of course there are the challenges, and that's to any relationship where you've got to work through and have an awareness of it and how you communicate and things. So even people within the same body type can still have challenges. That's just having that awareness.
There's something else within each group. So it's called 360 because it's 360 degrees. So when you do your profile, not only you know what body type you are, but what number you are. And so I know I'm an activator 130. Now if you read the profile of 130, it's very different to 150, even though they're only separated by 20 degrees. So I recently did all my family, all the siblings and so on. And so my siblings are not that far away, but the differences are huge. Like my brother would be typically, just like I make decisions like this, my brother is more like a steady kind of guy, and he goes to the same place on holidays every year. I'm like, ugh. And when we're going through his profile, there's a part that says you benefit from repetitive actions, even though he's a connector. So he's a spatial numbering connector that benefits from repetitive situations. It makes him feel calm and safe.
What happens if you identify, I know I do this, two opposite sides of the wheel, so connector and diplomat?
It's funny that you asked that question. Certain numbers, certain numbers, like for example, there's Diplomat 280, comes across as a connector.
So I had a client yesterday who, honestly, I was putting her as connector guardian, and she was in her head, and we went through the whole process, and at the end it was like, looked at it, it was like diplomat, and we're both like, what? And so that is the 280 diplomat. So all the information around the chronobiology in terms of taking things slower and building up during the day was completely her. All the information around the mind was completely her, but it had a whole lot of information about her need to be out, to be creative, to be inspired, and to like dynamic activities as well. So she was like, yes, a diplomat, but with a connector way of being. And if you met her, you would completely think she was a connector. It was a shock to both of us.